G'day legends, I hope that you're all doing well and having a great end to the week. Happy Friday, it's almost bloody done. Now, I somehow just forgot literally the whole second half of my video yesterday, and because I had some meetings in the morning or whatever, it ran late and I was like, I can't refilm it, I just need to bloody edit it and go from there. So it'll be in this one, but it wasn't time critical anyway, but I'm just going to blame the brain tumour. It's a good way out of a lot of things. I've got that hand of cards of victim, just be like, brain tumour, bang, yep, I'm off the hook. But let's have a look at what's going on in Ukraine. We'll look at some attacks. We'll talk about that. We will look at some maps. And of course, we'll talk about Wagner PMC that we missed out on yesterday. Now, I think I might do a dive into some stuff that's happening in Africa as well. I've been holding off from that a bit because it's like my expertise on that is so limited compared to some of the other guys doing it. Like, they absolutely know what's going on, and I was like, it'll take me a long time to sort of get up to that, and I want to be actually bloody competent on it. No, have a think tell me actually what you would think if I did that. At least try and learn what is going on in depth. Anyway, let's have a look at a couple of things. Now, what we're going to start with is some of these ships. Now, we did see the SIG, which was a tanker that had been under sanctions by the US from delivering jet fuel from Russia to Syria, under sanctions since 2019, was targeted by Ukrainian kamikaze suicide drone boats. And here we see the first video of the damage here. So on the side of the boat here, below the waterline, well, above and below the waterline, it looks like a fairly big hole here. Now, I don't know much about boats, but people are saying, I know this is probably a ship, not a boat, people are saying this is where sort of the engine motor room sits, and this could be a lot to fix from here, and saying that there is a buckle at the superstructure as well. So I'm not fully over that, but I guess if you know more than me, you'd be able to get a look on this. Now, this isn't as big of a boat as I thought. Like, I live in a port area, Port Adelaide, and I was expecting this to be like a fucking massive tanker like we have here. This isn't as big as I thought, but still, you know, still a bloody big ship. It's not a tinny sailing around. And the Olena, which on the earlier that same day we saw that other one targeted this Russian landing ship here. Now, what I mean by landing ship is it can carry other things to then land onto the beach. So acts as an asset for then amphibious assaults, similar to HMAS Adelaide and Canberra. So this boat here has been taken up into then the dry dock, and we can just see the damage on the side here caused by then that Ukrainian suicide drone boat. Now, we have seen a number of these taken out by Ukraine before, both damaged and completely taken out, and this is a better photo of what has happened here. So, yeah, both above and below the waterline and causing significant damage there. And there is a lot of questions being asked about how those will actually then be prepared. Now, I guess some of the bigger news today is that Russian missiles, or at least one, has struck the Redeploys hotel in the city of Zaporizhia, causing extensive damage. Now, let's have a look at where this is. So this at the pin drop is where this hotel is, and we can line up that it is exactly there because we can drag the little man on Google Maps and look at the front then of the Redeploys hotel and line it up with the photograph we have today. Now, of course, it is on a different angle, but this is the same hotel. And as you can tell, very, very extensive damage here. The massive damage to vehicles out the front, and of course this large crater caused from these missiles. So a very big attack. Now, I think a lot of people don't realise how close Zaporizhia is actually to the front line. And I know myself, because Zaporizhia feels like a normal city when you're there. When I was there and driving from the front line back, you'd be like, holy shit, I'm already here. So this is Lobkovy down here, where we see the first of the front line. And if anyone's followed me for a while, we delivered firefighting tools to help out the civilian firefighters from attacks down in here. We delivered a number of those tools. So where we see that this hotel is the hotel sits right about here. So right there, we'll say, and we'll come down. And let's just go from here on the front line. So we're talking 38.4 kilometers. So 40 Ks. It is very, very close. And I know when we're there, you can still hear certain bits of artillery, whatever, happening from there. It's very close. So what we have seen is that huge attack there. Now, the Ukrainian defense has officially stated 1 person was killed and 16 injured, stating they were targeting children. posting that there was a Children's Day excursion there ending at 6 p.m. and then the strike hit at 7 p.m., an hour after the end of this excursion. Meanwhile, Russian sources will claim it was housing foreign soldiers. So Denise Brown, who is a UN humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, in a United Nations statement online, has said, "I am appalled by the news that a hotel frequently used by UN personnel and our colleagues from NGOs supporting people affected by the war has been hit by a Russian strike in Zaporizhia shortly ago. It is utterly inadmissible. I have stayed in this hotel every single time I visited Zaporizhia. My team uses it as their base for their frequent travels to the city. It was the UN base for the operation to evacuate civilians from the Azovstal plant in Mariupol in May last year." And the question being asked is this just a regular hotel with the UN, with journalists, with NGOs staying there? And yes, that is true. You could just go on booking.com and book a room there and stay there. I've stayed in the one literally across from it. But do a lot of these hotels also have a lot of foreign soldiers staying at them? Absolutely. So it's a bit of column A, bit of column B. And it is absolutely common for soldiers, journalists, civilians, all to be staying at the same hotels, eating at the same restaurants, catching trains. It's a full-scale war. What you need to, I guess, ask yourself is, when does something become a target? Is it 1% of soldiers to civilians? Does it have to be 100% soldiers? 50%? I don't know. Where is that line that you draw? Now, Russia has absolutely had indiscriminate attacks that, through either terror planning, poor accuracy, or poor intel, has hit purely civilian targets. And I'm not saying that this wasn't one of them. But in my experience in Ukraine, there is absolutely not enough done to try and separate combatants from civilians. And I realise how difficult this can be. And this is the exact same as Amnesty International found. Ask any journalist or NGO, probably offline's better, who has been in Ukraine, and they will share absolutely the same concern. I remember myself and 2 colleagues moved hotels specifically due to the amount of foreign soldiers also staying there. Now, does this justify anything? No, absolutely not. War is just fucking messy. And as a former soldier and someone with a lot of experience in multiple theatres around the world, this is why I'm always on the side of civilians and protecting civilians, both if they're your civilians or the other country's civilians. It doesn't matter. I'll always fall on that side. But we don't know exactly what has happened then at the Rykars hotel. So there's also been 2 fires in Moscow. There's been multiple. Now, I think these photographs are actually of the same, but there has been multiple pop-up again. Now, are these just something industrial, bloody a heater going off, or partisan strikes, drone strikes? Well, it's a bit of column A, bit of column B with these as well. Some are, some aren't, but there is a lot going on and moving. So let's have a look at the maps just to get your bearings on it. I know you're sick of this, but of course we have Ukraine in the centre here, the capital of Kyiv. Here we have the red areas occupied since 22, purple since 14. It's been Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk here, Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, Poland has put up to another 10,000 soldiers on their border to protect from Belarus. As we know, there's a lot going on there, and we're going to talk about that with Wagner, PMC, and whatever else is going on. Now, just to point out some capitals here, of course, we have Kyiv. We talk about Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, and Lysychansk, Donetsk here. So we're just talking about some of these important areas, and of course, Kramatorsk here. And from my experience, this is where a lot of these hubs are. Now, on the deep state, what have we seen? Deep state, we've seen very, very little change. So the only change I should say we've seen is in Robotyne. We have seen just this small advance here, that it is said that Ukraine is now right on the outskirts of Robotyne, or have just entered some of then the outskirts. Now, that is the only change on this map. And if we go into my maps folder, that's not helping me, we do see some photographs like this then of Robotyne. So I think that's somewhere to really keep an eye on, as we're going to see more movements around there. Now, there has been a mandatory evacuation of 37 settlements up in the northeast. Now, where are we talking about? Well, we talked about yesterday. So this is Kupiansk region, this is in Kivka. This is a really debated, hot topic zone at the moment. Now, ISW are saying, yeah, look, there's so much claim here, but we're not seeing anything actually proven. We're not seeing geolocated stuff. We're just seeing random bits and pieces. But there has been a mandatory evacuation from Ukraine here. So this is then from the Ukrainian government of the 37 settlements that then are getting evacuated, and this is a better one to look at, and this is where is being evacuated by the Ukrainian forces. So we are seeing that there could be a major push around here. Some are saying it's Ukraine doing it to try and draw the Russian forces in to basically create a massive ambush. We don't know. There's so many of this sort of four-dimensional chess things. I'm always like waiting for it. I'm like, Russia's capable of it, Ukraine's capable of it, and I'm always like, that's gonna, that's gonna come, that's gonna draw them in, and this is gonna cut off them. We'll see these new vehicles get involved. We'll see T-14 Armadas, we'll see Leopard 2s, Charlie 2s, and it just never sort of seems to happen. So what is actually happening here? I don't know. It always tends to go back to just a grind operation, Soviet tactics on the front lines there. So we're not then particularly sure, but we haven't seen really any change on deep state. But what we do see some is both on the Rybar and then the Suryak maps, which we talk about a lot. So it is saying that Russia has advanced near the outskirts of Sinkivka and Kislivka here as well. So Sinkivka here, so push out to here, and Kislivka down here, which is already showing on the outskirts, but I can't confirm any of this. I'd need it across multiple maps before we start confirming where things has moved. And not only multiple maps, we need both maps from different sources on opposite ends of the spectrum. But Rybar Russian sources does show that the grey zone at least has entered Sinkivka, and the grey zone is pushing well out across this waterway down here. So we don't really know exactly what is going on there, but I'm sure that things will start catching up soon. And if we don't start seeing some of the other maps update with that, well, we don't know. There's a lot of random propagandary things going around. So let's then go to the north of Bakhmut. And there's been a number of articles today by like The Guardian saying that Ukraine's having advances on the north and south near Bakhmut, and that the Russian forces can't move at all in Bakhmut, and we're not seeing those changes across the maps. But that, just because the map doesn't change doesn't mean that there hasn't been some level of a tactic change there or a firepower change. And just because the red line doesn't move doesn't mean the situation hasn't changed dramatically. But we're not seeing any real change there. But what Suryak Maps is saying, that up in the north, we are seeing an amount of Russian ground taken back near Berkhivka, near this reservoir here between Yahidny and Berkhivka. So this is, of course, this reservoir, Yahidny-Berkhivka, this reservoir. That sits up to here. So let's jump across satellite map, see if we can line up one of these paddocks. So we have this funny shaped paddock here on this road. This is the same paddock, so it's coming down basically the side across to here, and that is then the claim there. This same grey zone on the ISW is shown yellow as far as claimed control. So again, it's very difficult to actually get what is going on in those regions. Now, one of the big things we did see is Ukrainian forces then cross the Dnipro River down in the southwest. Now, we didn't really see too much of a change here. Now, some things we need to point out is this is Novokhovka. This is where then the dam was, and it's in around this Kozachi Leri area. Now, the deep state isn't showing any change really at all in here, but the ISW in the same region, this Kozachi Leri, Pedstepny here, is showing that an amount of yellow only claimed area that Ukraine has crossed but hasn't got it, that Russia still claims they're in control of this. Now, there are Russian sources saying that thermobaric units are being deployed into this area to defend from here, and this is an indication that Ukrainian forces are then still on that left bank. This, of course, being a left bank over here, so it made that cross. Now, these aren't the greatest to line up, but where we're just talking is Kozachi Leri up here, Oleshki here, Antonovsky Bridge here. So this is, of course, the same bridge here. Now, some of these motorways are different on the deep state to what we're seeing here, but it is saying that Ukraine has managed to seize some ground in and around this region here, and where this splits off right in here as well. This is indicated by here, so just here. So that is very interesting. There is things moving, but currently no side is really having any big wins or areas of massive significance. And both sides seem very focused on attacks on different sides of the front line to draw resources and men to different areas. So Ukraine, these small attacks from Kherson across it, they're not going to be able to, seize and hold much terrain in here with those small, boat attacks. But what they do do is it's going to take Russian guys from the northeast and draw them around here. And these Russian attacks in the northeast are going to draw Ukrainian troops around here. That is, to my eye and a lot of people, is seeming like what is going on, looking for soft spots and trying to draw people to and from. This really makes it for resources a lot more difficult. And this indicates, really, to me, that the success in this war will be who can maintain the logistical supply to the front line and replenish their resources the most efficiently and the fastest. There are reports that the Russian artillery is lower than usual. There are also artillery manufacture and supply issues from the West as well. So what is really going on? Well, time will tell. Now, the White House today, talking about these supply issues, is asking Congress for another $24 billion in aid for Ukraine. Now, the quick breakdown of this is going to include $13.1 billion for the Department of Defense, $9.5 billion for equipment for Ukraine, and replenishment of US equipment stocks already sent to Kyiv. So, new missiles and stuff, anything fixed, whatever. And the remainder will be in continued military intelligence and other defense support. So we do know that Ukraine get a significant amount of intelligence from planes in the Black Sea, drones, satellites, all this type of stuff. There's a lot of that going into it, and that stuff is very expensive as well. So the remainder of that money is getting caught up from there. Someone we haven't spoke about for a while is Wagner PMC. And us YouTubers who like, to come onto war, profit from war any way we bloody can, doesn't matter what it is, then we miss, Prigozhin, because he gave us a hell of a lot of content when Bakhmut was going down. YouTubers don't care that tens of thousands of people losing their life as long as their pockets are getting bloody filled up and they can push whatever ad. Anyway, I'm being sarcastic about that, but Prigozhin has been awful quiet. And ISW yesterday released some stuff about Wagner PMC and Prigozhin himself. So, speculation about the Wagner Group's withdrawal from Belarus suggests that aspects of the deal between Russian President Putin and Wagner Group financer Yevgeny Prigozhin following Wagner's armed rebellion on June 24 have collapsed. The Russian insider source claimed on August 8th that Wagner forces are conducting their first stage of withdrawal from Belarus by busing groups of 500 to 600 personnel from Belarus to Krasnodar Krai or Vorenzia or Rostov Oblast, and that the second stage will begin after August 13th, so moving back into Russia. Insider source and a Wagner-affiliated source speculated that Wagner forces may be leaving Belarus because Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko refused to finance Wagner when he discovered that Russia would not be paying for Wagner as he evidently expected. Putin and Lukashenko allowed Russian forces and Prigozhin to continue to operate in Belarus after the armed rebellion. But a small group of Wagner guys would stay in Belarus to train Belarusian forces, and this is mainly what we have seen. Although the ISW has not observed visual evidence of Wagner forces moving out of Belarus. Wagner-affiliated sources claimed that the main Wagner forces will activate at the end of August, but did not elaborate on the statement. Claims that Wagner forces are moving out of Belarus, a relatively safe haven for Wagner and Prigozhin, back to Russia. That Wagner mentions of new orders, the claims of future activation of Wagner forces at the end of August likely suggest the aspects of the deal that allowed Wagner to move to Belarus and continue operations there and in Africa have collapse. And they break down a little bit this more. Will we see Wagner back in Ukraine? Will we see them in Africa? We have seen only today that Niger have asked for more Wagner support in Africa. We know Wagner have always had a large influence in Africa, growing, and currently what's going on there seems like Russia is having a lot more influence and Wagner is having more influence there. So maybe, Wagner at the end of the day is a private military contract. They're a private force that they will go where the money follows them. Now, yes, their influence from the state is a bit more tight than a lot of other forces. They're heavily financed by the state. But at the end of the day, if there's more business in Africa, that's where I'd see Prigozhin then pushing his men. So to expand a bit on this in number 2, Putin is likely still concerned about the threat that Prigozhin poses to his long-term goals and continues to focus definitely separating Prigozhin from Wagner. And this is something we spoke about particularly when Wagner was having some success in Bakhmut, some success in Ukraine. Prigozhin was very public. Prigozhin became very popular amongst a lot of groups. And there was this growing idea that Prigozhin could really threaten Putin's power. Putin's June 29th meeting with Prigozhin and 35 Wagner commanders further indicated that Putin intends to maintain Wagner Group as a cohesive fighting force rather than breaking it up and seeking to separate Prigozhin from Wagner leadership and forces. This, of course, we spoke about yesterday, that on the sidelines of the Russian Africa Summit in St. Petersburg, that Prigozhin was there with some African leaders too. Putin's prioritization of separating Prigozhin and Wagner and attempting to maintain a reconstituted Wagner fighting element appears to be at odds with the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's objectives. As we know, Shoigu and Prigozhin have had very public disputes, and Shoigu also has his fingers in pies of other PMCs too. Alternatively, Putin may intend for Wagner's forces to return to Russia in order to facilitate the destruction or restructuring of Wagner. Putin appealed to Wagner commanders in a speech on July 26th, appealing to persuade them to continue to fight in Ukraine by joining the Russian military. This appeal appears not to have been successful, as many Wagner personnel deployed to Belarus and individual Wagner commanders and personnel continue to express their loyalty to Wagner and Prigozhin. The Kremlin has also reportedly attempted to control Wagner's operations in the Middle East and subordinate Wagner's operations there to the Russian MOD following the rebellion on June the 24th. Wagner commanders released a statement on August the 9th claiming that Wagner fighters have been receiving calls and advertising opportunities to work with other private military companies, so trying to poach guys across in Africa. As we know, some of these heavy hitters, these oligarch types, have a lot of interest there as well. Putin may intend for Wagner's forces to return to Russia so that he can more easily facilitate Wagner's subordination to the Russian MOD or disband the organization entirely. And that links back to what we first talked about here, that Putin is still concerned, that Putin is still likely concerned the threat of Prigozhin for his long-term goals, that Prigozhin is a very popular character. But all of this is speculation around what we will see Wagner PMC do next. And I don't think we'll see them back in Ukraine in a large scale. I think we'll see them more in a training capacity, both in Russia and Belarus. We may see them back on the front line somewhere to create sort of that storm unit there. But with what's happening in Africa, it just seems like Wagner have a lot more opportunity there, can do more of their classical Wagner-style operations there, rather than this sort of military-esque, bogged-down, trench warfare sort of grind-away operations that have been done. I don't know, but none of us know. Well, none of us have a crystal ball and can look into and go, this is what is going to happen. And I say this, that there is no guarantees in life, and especially there's no guarantees in war. What will happen on this front line in the next 24 hours, next week, next 2 months, next 12 months, no one knows. Legends, I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a great weekend. I may see you tomorrow. I do have an event on, but I'm going to try and smash out a video around that. But if I don't see you, have a great day. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.